I didn't realize how extensive your career was until I looked up your LinkedIn. Like, you're a author, teacher, like founder. Like, I had no idea the depth. Like, you're a teacher too. That actually brings me to my very first question. How do you describe like what you do if you're to like, you know, meet me in the elevator and you're like, hey, I'm Adam.
I've done that a lot here actually because it's such a vibrant community. And so what I usually say to people is I am the co-founder and chief operating officer of a nonprofit based in North Carolina that works with schools to co-design innovative school cultures. And so what that actually means is I do a lot of workshops with teachers, I do a lot of coaching, I do a lot of strategic planning with leaders, all in the service of trying to make schools more equitable, more engaging, more powerful, and more learner-centered. So basically trying to help schools innovate for the sake of students.
As an educator myself, I think this is something amazing that the community is doing. I was really impressed on this opportunity when I heard of it. Just seeing what all these kiddos have done, you know, this summer and all the accomplishments, you really get to see the positive in the education, even extending through the summertime where a lot of them, you know, are doing other things. And so I think this engagement, just to see all of the students and the families, family involvement is so important. This is really what education is all about.
And so my second question is, where were you born?
I was born in Columbia, South Carolina.
And then what kind of kid were you when you were younger?
I've always been a goofball. Just always wanted to make people laugh and be silly. I would say since I was really little, that's what I sort of found myself wanting to joke around. I also found myself like often outside playing, being super active, always wanting to be around people, and eventually, and I'm not sure when this sort of emerged in me, but a sort of a deep curiosity about people that I was just like, what makes people tick? Where are people from? What do they do? What are their motivations? How do they operate? I think partly like trying to be a goofball, you're always trying to read people like, oh, what's going to make this person laugh versus that person laugh? And I just sort of was the class clown. I mean, I was voted class clown in my high school senior class, so it was very much my identity to make the wisecrack, to be sarcastic, to be silly, to be slapstick, to get a rise, get a laugh out of people. And so I think in that process, for whatever reason, I was compelled to do it, which I won't go too Freudian on you and get into all the
Could you actually?
do you want me to?
Please, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was you know, trying to bring light into the world because there was some sadness, you know, that was going on in my family as a young child, and so I think I felt it. Maybe I held it upon my shoulders to some degree to be the comic relief for the family, and then that extended into my social life. And in order to do that, you know, you have to be able to read people, and so with that came this sort of softer side eventually of interviewing people a lot and talking to them about what they're up to and understanding their motivations and what makes them sort of motivated and excited to do whatever they're doing in the world. Naturally, as you may hear the foundations of becoming an educator, right? Of just like seeing people live into their potential. And I like, if there's any way ever, and you may see me this way here at times where I'm just like, oh, there's something you want to do with your life? Like, how can I encourage you? How can I give you a high five? Who can I connect you with? How can I help you feel empowered to pursue whatever it is whether that's what I'm into or not? I just get excited by people pursuing their passions and purpose. I think some of that started at a young age, perhaps from being a silly class clown and goofball.
Yeah, it's interesting that you made the hop from class clown into education. Like, I wouldn't put the two together. I would think comedian or actor or It's just not the first thing that would come to mind. So I'm wondering, and you kind of answered this already, sort of the logic between the jump of like class clown to education. Is that just comes back to wanting just to help as many people as possible?
Well, I mean, I ultimately want people to be happy. And whether that's me making them smile and like bringing some light to that small part of their day, or whether it's what I came to find out, over time as I developed as a human being, was that like, oh, there's deeper waters here. There's happiness, there's joy, there's laughing because something's truly deeply funny. There's laughing at other people's expense. There's all kinds of ways that like laughter. And if we look at comedians and how they are making people laugh, sometimes it's cheap shots in ways that are actually, causing harm in the world. And so I didn't want to be on that side of the equation. I think I decided at some point that I wanted to be fighting on the side of light. I wanted to be Jedi, not I wanted to be Jedi, not dark. Yeah, not Sith, right? So how could I sort of do that? And so I think a lot of my class clowniness in school was born of extraordinary boredom, and so therein lies a connection to why I got into education to some degree. Like, if I wasn't engaged by what was happening in the class because it was like a lecture or a worksheet or something that was totally inactive and asked nothing of me intellectually or socially, did not like pull upon my inner potential to solve some authentic problem, like when teachers, and most of them weren't doing that in my personal education, when they weren't accessing that aspect of me, that inner potential, I was bored. So I was like, wow, maybe I can make these folks over here laugh and build a connection with people. Or maybe I can get through the day by making other people laugh and making myself feel positive because I brought a little smile to somebody's face, so there was much of my class clowniness was born of that, like, disengagement, which we see, I saw as a teacher all the time. Like,
yeah, great teachers.
Yeah, like those kids that were making the cracks and stuff. It was like, oh, you're bored. Like, hey, got it. Okay, you're sending me, with your behavior, you're sending me a message here. So how can I wrap this class even more intensively around personalized for that person's interest, right? For that student's interest. Therein lies the connection. I was hyper disengaged with school, so I became a class clown. And so I got into being a teacher and getting into it. Now what I do is like education transformation work, precisely because I was so disengaged. And then as I grew older, saw how disengagement, affected some populations disproportionately, along identity boundaries, along marginalized population boundaries. BIPOC folks, folks with lower socioeconomic status had less access to really high quality education. So it became a social justice question to me as well. So it wasn't just about my experience and how it could have been better, because poor me, woe is me, like I didn't have a good time. It became about that larger societal issue, the gaps that were being created by oftentimes like systematic oppression of certain groups over others, right? So that's the connection. Maybe no one's ever asked it that way, but interestingly, I meet a lot of other people that liked. Maybe another theory is that I liked an audience, right? Like,
yeah.
It's fun. You're a teacher. You have the audience, and they're like a captive audience. And so as a young person emerging from high school, the immature mind perhaps that I had that was way less lofty in its idealism that I'm espousing to you right now, it was like, oh, like I can laugh with these kids. Like, let's have a good time. Why don't we have fun together? Because you may think back to your favorite teachers. I know my favorite teachers were hilarious. And so they were funny. They were cracking us up. We were all laughing together. We were having a good time. It gave us a break in the day from what is sometimes like the monotonous march of a traditional schooling experience for so many kids, right? So I wanted to be that. I wanted to be that ray of sunshine. I wanted kids to come into my classroom and be like, oh man, that was fun. What just happened? That was like silly. So there was an ego in there of like, yeah, I feel cool and special and funny. And there was also this genuine desire to like be that ray of sunshine.
One thing I noticed, and I don't know if you also had the same experience, but like a lot of the like quote unquote dumb kids have done great in real life, and a lot of the people who are maybe book smart or really were hard studiers in high school, a lot of them did great, and then a lot of them ended up in places you just wouldn't expect, or you expect they'd do better, and it really taught me you can't guess what's gonna happen. I don't know if you had the same experience with your high school grad class.
Yes, I did, and I feel like that informed a lot of my practice as a teacher too, of thinking, and an educator. Is like, who are the students in here who are like the real disruptors? Like, who are the ones that are thinking so outside the box that they really don't fit into what a traditional status quo school is going to offer them? And how can I fan that flame? How can I embrace and do sort of judo on that kind of spirit that they have, where they, if you don't engage them well, like, they're gonna be so difficult as a student. You're just like, oh my god, like, you're always disrupting, you're always getting in the way of me, like, on my path that I've got. And so how can I then empower them and go like, oh, I see that you're passionate about this, or I see that you think differently, and you're courageous. Like, you're challenging me in front of the whole group. Like, you're able to speak out where other people would never speak out. You're a leader. That's what that's called. Like, you're a disruptor. You know who's looking for disruptors? All the top startups, all the top tech companies. They're looking for disruptors. They're looking for people that think differently. I mean, it's Apple's slogan, right? Think different. Mm-hmm. Like, we in classrooms have to be really careful about how we treat students that are pushing against the sort of typical framework of a traditional classroom, because they could be our entrepreneurs, they could be our problem solvers, they could be our outside the box thinkers. In fact, they are, and they're communicating that at a young age, and we can choose to either foster that or squash it. To me, there's plenty of examples of folks, like I had friends in high school that were so far outside of doing the traditional successful thing. They were very alternative. They were pushing against every boundary that was ever put on them. And they're doing tremendously well now. And I'm like, yeah. So I don't have counterexamples of those folks that were the valedictorians like, personally anyway, that were the valedictorians that couldn't cut it in the real world. But I do know that that's oftentimes what we prize in traditional education, is folks that can follow instructions, that can read the minds of those around them to the people-pleasing extreme, right? Where it's like, you're my teacher and I am going to get an A in your class. What do I have to do to get an A in your class? Rather than developing that inner compass of what drives them and that sort of locus of control within themselves. They give, if they're a super high achiever, oftentimes they give the locus of control externally. And they're in a hyper people-pleasing, and traditional schools, hyper hierarchical environments reward that kind of behavior, that compliance. Does the world need a whole bunch of compliant people when there's pressing problems that we really need to address in the world? Perhaps we need some folks that are really good at doing that and following the instructions and reading people and pleasing them. And it also needs the folks that have their internal locus of control, that are thinking about those outside the box ideas, that are pushing against boundaries, because those boundaries are what got us into the mess in the first place. Mm-hmm. So how do we break through those and find something outside of them? That's where innovation is. That's where invention is. That's where entrepreneurship and those new ideas that spark really are. So to me, it's like, how do you create environments that allow for that to happen? It's that sort of controlled chaos, as it were. How do we get people, connected to a process that unleashes and unlocks those collaborative, brilliant ideas, and brings them into the real world? So I would say that animates the mission of open way learning and my own personal mission as a human being. So
I understand what open way learning does a lot more than I did before, even just you taking through that, and we'll go into more details.
I'm giving you long answers to short questions.
No, it's good. I'm assuming you had an overall positive high school experience.
Yeah, I mean, I was, in terms of the academically, no, I wasn't like, woohoo.
I'm not talking. More like social.
Socially, I felt really connected. I mean, I went to school to be with my friends. Yeah. And that was what animated me in high school primarily, was that social milieu that high school is. And I played sports, and that was a big deal to me at that time.
Where did you go to university, and what did you study?
Yeah, so that's an interesting story. I actually took 2 gap years before university. And so instead of going straight to university, this dude, an old friend, like comes into my high school, senior year high school class with one of my favorite teachers, who was one of the really funny ones. And he's like, he comes to talk about this program he was doing in Boston. He's like, I moved to inner city Boston, and this is a kid that was into University of North Carolina was accepted to a very selective, very excellent university in my state. He instead opted to go to inner city Boston and live on food stamps. Like he was living on, like he wasn't making enough money to actually like live there without government assistance. And he was like working after school programs with inner city youth. And he just came and talked about that. He's like, I'm doing this program, I'm doing this instead of going straight to college. And that day I was like, I'm not going straight to college. Like I'm gonna go do what he did. And so I decided that I was going to pursue that. I pursued that program that he talked about explicitly. It didn't have the availability I wanted, so I ended up actually living in Costa Rica as an 18-year-old. I moved to Costa Rica and I taught English in this tiny village. And I was so ignorant of Costa Rica and anything Central American geography-wise, I thought I was going to an island. I did not even realize that it was part of a continent. I was just like, I showed up there. The first day, they put me in a homestay family to where I was going to teach, and I like literally couldn't understand a word. A word folks were saying to me. And I had taken 4 years of Spanish in high school, and I was like, how's this going to work? So the next day I was in a classroom teaching 2nd through 6th graders, and I was like, huh. And the kids were asking me stuff, and I had no idea what they were asking. I was just like, they were asking to use the bathroom, but they were saying, I knew bathroom was baño. Like, why aren't they asking baño? They were just saying, con permiso. And I was like, what does that mean? And they're like, con permiso, dude. And I'm like, I just started saying, sí. I'm like, sí. You all right? Yes. And then then they come back 5 minutes later. I'm like, oh, they're asking for permission to go to the bathroom. So I have lots of stories like that. That was like, as an 18-year-old, that was my first teaching experience. I lived in the top of a mountain in a coffee farming village, and there were no books in the school, and there was just this tiny school on top of a mountain. And so I lived with a family there and taught for 3 months, and that forever changed my life. Then I went and lived in New Zealand and worked at a conservation trust and killed a lot of possums.
Where in New Zealand? Because I lived in New Zealand also, and I'm half Kiwi. I got my dual citizenship.
Oh, are you?
Yeah, so I'm just curious where you were.
On the North Island, Thames.
Thames, okay, yeah.
Yeah, so on the Coromandel Peninsula.
Nice.
So it killed a lot. I have a lot of possum blood on my hands.
That's okay. You're forgiven.
Yeah,
it's for the better of all nature.
I know, yeah. It was a weird conservation, experience for me, because I was like, I love nature. And then I go to New Zealand and they're like, what conservation work is here? It's like killing all the things that came here that are invasive species. And I was like, oh, I don't know how to feel about all this. So that was an interesting experience. So those 2 seminal experiences led me to say, oh, I want to be in education, because I had such a good time teaching once I figured out how to speak Spanish. and then was just loving living in nature, dominated by nature at this conservation trust in New Zealand. So I became an outdoor educator the following year in Texas. When I was living in Texas, teaching kids from the inner city Texan cities outdoor education about like, yeah, let's do this thing on rocks, and let's go fishing, now let's do rock climbing, now let's do archery, now let's go talk about birds, not whatever like the school signed up for. I was teaching those classes to mostly like upper elementary school students. During that time, I ended up deciding I wanted to go back to college to study biology and understand more, because the kids were asking me all these questions that I was like, I don't know. It's like, how does nature work? I'm like, I don't know how nature works. Let's go fish. I don't know. So I decided at that point I wanted to go back to school, and I chose Evergreen State College in Washington, Olympia, Washington. And it is the wackiest university you could ever dream of. It was amazing. I mean, it was interdisciplinary, so my courses were taught by several professors at once. So it's like an English professor and a biology professor talk about the evolution of communication. Mm-hmm. So we're studying linguistics and animal communication systems and understanding how human language evolves and how animal communication systems evolve based on environmental constraints. And I was like, whoa, like... thinking that interdisciplinary way was really powerful for me, and allowed me to dive deep into the sort of ecology. I studied animal behavior. I have a degree in animal behavior, and now I'm co-founder of an education nonprofit. Go figure. But also, my senior year there, my final year, I decided to study education more intensively because I realized after watching a lot of frogs have sex in Costa Rica, which was what I was studying, it was frog mating systems, and I decided I liked the thing I was excited about doing with that research was talking to people about it, and like doing the final presentation to my classmates because we found out some cool stuff, and I was like, oh, I discovered at that point, I was like, I'm more excited about communicating this information than I am about sitting here in the jungle with binoculars for 4 hours watching a frog writing every, oh, it just ate an ant. Oh my God, fascinating. And I'm like, I wasn't like, this is the best thing that ever happened. I was like, this is kind of, I just want to talk to people about these silly frogs, Like I wanted to communicate about watching little poison dart frogs wrestle. And like us playing Marvin Gaye to them on speakers and seeing what happens. Yeah. We were doing these callback experiments, and we'd see if they were attracted to the calls on our speakers. So they'd like come at the speaker and be like, "What are you doing, speaker?" If you played another call.
See, Marvin Gaye's like universally like love making.
So we were seeing if Marvin Gaye was attractive to the poison dart frogs we were studying.
Was it?
So no.
Oh.
Yeah. Sorry.
That's a disappointment.
I wish I could offer you the bombshell you're looking for here. But so I ended up studying education at this wackadoodle school that blew my mind and has forever changed the paradigm of education I operate within because it was interdisciplinary. You can invent your own courses. So
oh man,
I was like, oh, I'm gonna go to Bolivia and Peru, and I'm gonna study Quechua, and I'm gonna help volunteer on a project with water engineering in a remote village that I have to hike into, and I'm going to write a bunch of poetry and do a photo essay and read all these books about South America. So that was my final semester of university, was doing that. That was powerful because it was at a time, it was like, oh, you can become a lifelong learner. You can own your own education. You don't have to let other people tell you what you're gonna learn. You can drive that process. And so it was a very powerful way for me to sort of end that university experience.
Man, that's wild. And then what did you do, like, which company or what did you do like after uni?
I led trips internationally for a year with my wife. We led a 3-month-long trip to Central America with 12 18-year-olds. Lived with families, scuba diving in Honduras, turtle conservation in Costa Rica, language classes in Guatemala. Just a really special experience. A lot of service, did a lot of service with them. And then went to East Africa and did that same sort of deal in Tanzania, Uganda, Rwanda.
Wow.
So that was my first year out of uni, was leading those trips. And then the leader there asked me to join the office and be part of the administration of the company that I was working for. So I ended up doing that and studying and setting students up with internships all over the world.
What was the name of the company?
Carpe Diem.
Carpe Diem. Oh,
yeah.
Cool.
So that was my first experience out of college. Then I met some like total Jedi instructors there that I was like, what are you? Like, they blew my mind. They were such effective educators. They did some trainings for us at one of the Carpe Diem trainings, and I was like, and I went up to them, where did you learn all this stuff that you're teaching us? And they're like, Outward Bound. I was like, oh, what's Outward Bound? And so, however, I did know a little bit about Outward Bound already, because I had grown up with my dad like telling me the legend of his Outward Bound course that he did in the 70s or 80s. That was just like a wild experience that he did with his students in the mountains of North Carolina. So I always knew about this outdoor wilderness adventure company called Outward Bound. When I found out that that's where they had learned all their skills, I was like, oh, I'm gonna go work there. So I got a job at North Carolina Outward Bound School, left Carpe Diem, went and worked for Outward Bound for a couple of years, and then my wife and I started our first company as I was working with Outward Bound.
And what was that first company?
It was called the Pioneer Project.
Yeah.
It was a gap year organization, so it was targeted towards like 18 to 24-year-olds that were taking a break from university at some point and trying to figure out what they wanted to do with their lives. So we were focused on traditional crafts, outdoor leadership, and sustainable living. So students came and lived with us on a farm, and I was the wilderness guy, so I would take them on 5-day expeditions, you know, rock climbing or backpacking or canoeing or whatever, mountain biking, and then they would grow a lot of their own food, learn how to cook from the garden, learn how to set up gardens and take care of them. And then they had all these traditional craft teachers that were teaching them like blacksmithing and pottery and bookbinding and fiber arts, and we tanned a hide with them, and then they made stuff out of the leather that they created and out of the buckskin they created and things like that. So we ran that for 2.5 years and had 4 seasons of it.
Wow. I mean, one thing I can't help but wonder is like coordinating, I mean, the ages of 18 to 24. I mean, that's a wild age.
Big gap.
So, and not only big gap, but like how do you manage, like, I'm sure they're all good kids or good adults, but I would assume like, you know, romantic relationships happen, or, you know, maybe conflict of maybe a couple of students don't get along with each other. Did you have any experiences like that? And how did you manage when stuff like that, when issues arise?
Oh yeah, I mean, it was a constant stream of, as is any educational endeavor, and I would say any company that anybody ever starts has a lot of those elements that you have to manage conflict and manage all the people that are involved in the organization. I would say, yeah, things came up regularly, and how I manage philosophically, I think conflict is a good thing, and so I'm not averse to it, and I think the real issues arise when people stuff the conflict under the rug. So I'm just a very transparent person, and if there's an elephant in the room that people aren't talking about it, I'm gonna be like, hey, see this elephant over here? Like, bah, bah, bah. Why are we avoiding this? Should we talk about it? Everybody feel a little uncomfortable with me poking at it? And so that was kind of my philosophy, and still remains my philosophy. So how I navigate that as a leader in general is invite people's transparent feelings about whatever the topic is. So say 2 people are having a disagreement, have them both sort of voice their side of it. If I'm the in-between person and I'm the facilitator of a conflict resolution session, I would say, like, how do you feel? Okay, how about you? Great. Okay, what can you own? Like, what can you take responsibility for in contributing to this conflict? How about you? Great. Okay. How do you think that they felt when this conflict arose? And what do you think was going on in their mind and heart as this was all happening? Okay, so that's empathy. Let's empathize with each other. How about you? What do you think? Did either of you miss something that still needs to be voiced, that was a feeling you were having that the other person didn't intuit? Okay, great. Now what's our plan for avoiding this or repairing the damage that's been done in the future? And so that's a protocol that it's called VOMP, voice, own, empathize, plan. I mean, if it's an intractable conflict that people can't seem to work through on their own, or through sort of basic nonviolent communication or concern, feeling, request statements, or whatever sort of basic tools they may have to resolve that conflict, that's a structure or protocol I'll often bring in to those. But it's become more reflexive over the years for me, that it doesn't feel robotic, or if I'm in conflict with someone, it's like, oh yeah, tell me more about what happened for you. Okay, here's what was happening for me. I can own this. Is there anything that you feel you may have contributed? Cool. So there's I'll walk people through that without saying, now we're going to VOMP, and you must feel like a robot now that I'm talking about VOMP. So, yeah.
Cool. I've never heard of that before, but when I was 28, it was the first time I was a production manager in an animated TV show. Mm-hmm. And so certain issues arise that they don't teach you in school, or even practically up till you're a certain position. And I got good advice from a producer early on, thankfully. And she's like, when an issue would come up, rather than sit on it and fester on it for like a week, which is, what I did initially, she's like, deal with it right there and then, like ripping off a Band-Aid. And so, you know, people basically tell people that same thing and it kind of like, well, you know, to a lesser degree, but it's just like deal with it now and just get it over with so you can move on and, you know, be productive.
Yeah, I mean, I believe all good relationships are built on rupture and repair. So if we don't allow things to rupture and we try to hang out in this like, oh yeah, let's wallpaper over any issues we're having, and then we don't have any chance to repair. And if we know how we argue or we know how we have conflict with people and we can trust that we can get through that, then that ultimately leads to more trust. It ultimately leads to an organization that can function more effectively because we know we'll be there's another framework called radical candor that's like, how can we be radically candid with each other, and as opposed to obnoxiously aggressive, or ruinous ruinous empathy is one of the other ones, or I can't remember all the exact, so you can cut this out, but that idea of radical candor is really an important thing that we often share with educators and any organization. Like, it matters that you care and that you're willing to challenge directly. If you don't care and you're challenging directly, you're being obnoxiously aggressive, right? So it's a sort of quadrant. So it's good to be in the like, I care about you and I'm going to challenge you directly. Just sort of the idea of assertiveness, right? Like, how can we be assertive rather than aggressive or passive aggressive or passive? So those communication styles are super important to be aware of in yourself. I mean, I just today with a colleague was owning like, oh, yes, that comment I made was passive aggressive. And I'm sorry, and I need to do better. So that could have blown up into this whole thing if I had been like, no, it wasn't. No, and you're the jerk. You know, like, you got to take ownership. You got to empathize with how people are feeling. And you got to say what you mean and say it courageously. So I don't know if you were looking for an entire philosophy of conflict management, but that's...
No, I think I learned a lot, and I'll put all the prompts and text in the wide shot, and so all the viewers can learn all these new acronyms that I feel like a lot of stuff I've sort of used without knowing that there was a philosophy or a term behind it. So right. I definitely tell you're a teacher, because I'm just sitting here interviewing you and I'm learning all these different things.
Well, I'm glad if I can be of service. That's always a gift for me.
So, I mean, I feel like I pretty have a firm idea of the answer to this question, but what initially prompted the idea for open way learning?
The basis of it, we were all teachers, 6 staff members, are all taught at the same school together.
Wow.
So we taught at this school in Western North Carolina. And that school was just doing really innovative stuff. Like, when I came there, I was told, literally on the first day of my employment, they said, anything you've seen in a traditional school, don't do it here. So that's a pretty big charge. And the other thing they said is, we want to do project-based learning all day, every day. So if we can aspire towards that. So I came in as an experiential educator. So mind you, when I got into that job at that school, I had already spent 7 years traveling the world, teaching in a lot of different sort of outdoor or international locales. I had been in the classroom. I had founded a program that I had run for 2.5 years with my wife and a couple other folks. It wasn't my first rodeo in education, and my education, the way I was teaching and working in education was so far outside the norm that when I came into the classroom, it was like, yeah, it's gonna be weird. So project-based learning was this perfect vehicle for me, because it's under the umbrella of what we call experiential education, where you provide experiences for students to learn from, rather than sitting here and just like blah 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 talking head at them and filling them with your knowledge like they're just receptacles. Like, it's very much like a constructivist, as we might call it, educational approach, where students are building their own knowledge frameworks and they're applying that knowledge in a real world, authentic context. And so that's what they asked me to do when I first came on at that school, and I was like, let's do it, let's go. And I think it was my first year teaching there was this big grant called the XQ Super School Project, and it was like $10 million, and if your school wins it, you get $10 million. And I worked in a trailer when I started teaching, like a trailer that was a hand-me-down trailer from a church. It was infested with mice. Like, I shared half the trailer with the cafeteria. Our cafeteria was in a trailer And we're talking about like, and my colleague who I co-founded Open Way Learning with, Ben, he also had a hand-me-down trailer where one day he was teaching and he fell through the floor of it. So when we saw this $10 million carrot, so, and by the way, he was one of the top teachers in North Carolina. He was one of the top teachers nationally. Like he was being tapped by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation all the way in Washington State. This rural North Carolina teacher was being flown out to Seattle to give national level policy advice about education. So meanwhile, he's falling through the floor of his teaching trailer. So there was this really odd sort of, we were under-resourced, you might call it. And so we were like, all right, well, the state can't figure this out, the county can't figure this out, we're gonna go after this grant. So but we started sitting around like, well, we're pretty innovative as a school, I guess, but how could we really, but we're not gonna win some $10 million prize if we're not really pushing the boundaries. So we did this whole like community design, collaborative design process of how would we shift the school's model and how would we change everything. We worked with the students. We had the students like write a lot of the stuff and create all kinds of materials for this grant. We were bringing in the community. We brought in the school board. We were talking to businesses. We were talking to alumni about what could this school become. We ended up designing this whole model around based on this idea of open source learning, like the idea of us sharing everything we ever do with the world and getting other people's models and having this really vibrant community of practice that's bringing the best practices to each school in their own context, right? So open source learning, how do we open source everything we're doing and make it a model that other people can use? So that was our big concept. And so we ended up doing things like making the whole school, also doing things like making the whole school orient around one project at a time. So fully interdisciplinary, every subject area would tie into whatever that one project was at the school. And we went fully competency-based learning. We sort of like questioned the grading system and we're like, oh, how could every competency, every standard we're supposed to teach always be in play and students can always be working towards mastery of that standard? What would a classroom look like with a big project going on that's tied in interdisciplinarily and this assessment system and all kinds of other wacky, innovative things we were implementing. So we went ahead with that. We didn't win the grant, but we were just like, oh, we have this whole plan now. So we can do this in trailers. Let's do it.